Hey folks, I'm going to share a quick testimony because something happened the other day that was very unusual in my prayer time. It was my family always has prayer in the morning and then sometimes in the evening, and we get together, sit on the couch and just pray and sometimes read the Bible or do a little study or something like that. Well, this particular time was very interesting because as I was sitting there, I smelled this amazing aroma. It was very fragrant, and it's kind of like you know how perfumes kind of have a chemical smell. It wasn't that. It wasn't the scented oil smell. Sometimes those are really strong and have a kind of a oily smell or a acidic smell or something like that. It's probably not the right way to express it. It was different than that. And it was actually way more beautiful than that. Um, it was like smelling a bunch of flowers all at once without anything else added. It was so glorious. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And I just kind of ignored it at the time. And because I thought, well, maybe Katie went out and bought some essential oils that I didn't know about. And so I just kind of ignored it. And then Katie goes, does anybody else smell that? And everybody's like, yeah, I smell something too. And what was really interesting is we were like, where is it coming from? And I smelled one hand and it wasn't on one hand, and I smelled the other, and the other hand it was on the other hand. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Why is it on one and not the other? And I kept thinking to myself, I didn't buy anything. I didn't buy a fragrant aroma, and we don't have any lotions that I know of. And then my wife was smelling her hands in the same way. One hand was a little bit more fragrant than the others, and it was kind of a weird time. So we were all smelling each other's hands, which we don't normally do that in a prayer time. It was actually very awkward. And it was really interesting because everybody had a different level really of this scent. And in particular, our 4-year-old child, it was unbelievable. The aroma on one hand was nothing, which was really weird. And on the other hand, I mean, it was like it was pouring out of her hand. The smell was it was unbelievable. It was the most beautiful smell I'd ever smelled in my life. And we're like, what is this? And at the time, we're like, is this something biblical? Like what? Like we've never had any kind of miracle like this happen. And here's another part that was interesting about the smells. My 18-year-old didn't smell it at first, but he was, and I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes in my prayer time, I'm looking at my phone. Well, he was looking at his phone and wasn't really paying any attention when we were having our quiet time, which he normally does. And no, normally does pay attention. But anyway, he's looking at his phone and he doesn't smell it on either hand. Then he puts his phone down. And after he put his phone down, Katie said, smell again, just in case. And all of a sudden he started smelling it, both on his hands and other people. But he didn't smell it when he was looking at his phone, which was really interesting. And so we had a variety of different levels with the kids. In particular, like I said, our 4-year-old is just really strong. And so I went online and I was trying to think, what is this biblically? I mean, there's different scripture verses about fragrance and frankincense and myrrh and all these spices, and they were used for different anointings. And I don't have time to go into a study on it. And so I was trying to look at what is it, hands and fragrance, and I didn't know where in scripture to find it. And I even looked and couldn't find it. And then Katie, my wife, a couple minutes later goes, why don't we go to Song of Solomon? So I'm like, well, okay. And she immediately pulls up to Song of Solomon, chapter 5, and reads this. I rose up to open my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, and my fingers with sweet smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. Now, I don't have time to go into a Bible study on Song of Solomon. It's it's a combination between an actual relationship that Solomon is having with his bride, but it's also symbolic of our relationship with Christ, and we're called the bride of Christ. And I don't have time to go into a study on this, but it was unbelievable that we just happened to run into this passage, and that God in our prayer time this aroma was obviously not man-made. There's no way that we could have created such a beautiful smell. But anyway, I was blown away by this, and I wanted to share the testimony is that God, he intervened, and he allowed us the experience of smelling this fragrant aroma, and that it was almost as if he was preparing his bride. And I'm going to say this, guys. I believe time is short. I mean, everybody's heard that for 2,000 years. Oh, God, Jesus is coming soon. But I believe he's preparing his bride for his return. And I'm not so sure that aroma, one of the things a bride would do before she would walk down the aisle, or before she would participate in a wedding, she would go through this aromatherapy, and she would get all these fragrances that she would put on her so that she would be prepared for her husband, her groom. And the Bible, all through Scripture, calls us the bride of Christ. Matter of fact, the communion celebration is amazing. When Jesus offered us a cup of wine, when he offered us the wine, he said, take this as a new covenant. Now, most people don't understand this, but when a Jewish man would often propose to his wife, he wouldn't give her a ring necessarily. Sometimes what he would do is he would give her a cup of wine. And when she drank of that cup, she was accepting that marriage relationship, that marriage covenant. And that's why when Jesus, he said, take this cup, this is a new covenant in my blood. So the idea is, I believe God is preparing his bride, and hopefully and prayerfully for his return. So thanks for watching. I'm going to post this. I hope you folks share it. Thanks so much. God bless.